My name is Anjlie Patel, and I'm a lawyer and trademark agent in Toronto. For the last 5 years, I've helped independent designers navigate all areas of the law that impact their fashion business, including contract, employment, and intellectual property law. I want to thank Rosalind Griffith Hall for recommending me as moderator, a role I don't take lightly. Roz, as she's known to many, is a highly regarded Black creative, like the 11 esteemed panelists joining us today. Although our conversation today is virtual, it's anchored in Toronto and Canada, a city and country that resides on the land of Indigenous people who have lived here for thousands of years. This panel will discuss the complexity and importance of Black Canadian identities in fashion, design, culture, and media, share their personal experiences, and propose a way forward. As moderator, my interests in the business of fashion and contemporary culture will shape our discussion, but most importantly, like everyone tuning in, I'm here to listen and learn. The format this afternoon is as follows. I'm going to introduce our panelists. We'll discuss 4 topics: creative identity, Black Lives Matter, hiring practices, and content. Then for 10 minutes, we'll take as many questions as we can from the audience before closing. Please share your questions using the chat function, and please direct your question to a particular panelist. For example, my name is Anjlie, and my question is for Natasha. Now I want to introduce the panelists. Natasha Bruno is a beauty director at Fashion Magazine, prior to which she held editor roles at S Magazine and The Kid. Richard Campbell is director of fashion and beauty campaigns and editorials at talent management agency Judy Inc., prior to which he was agency director at Elmer Olsen Model Management. Steve Carty is an editorial and commercial photographer and videographer with 3 decades of experience, whose clients include Nike, Canada Goose, and Much Music. In 2009, he released his first photography book. Vanessa Kraft has been editor-in-chief at ELLE Canada since 2016, at which time she became the first ever Black editor-in-chief across ELLE's 46 international editions. Also, you might recognize her as a resident judge on the fashion reality TV show Stitched. Charmaine Gooden is one of Canada's pioneering Black creatives with a career over 3 decades in the fashion and beauty industry. As beauty and health editor at CHATELAINE, editor-in-chief of Images magazine, later known as Glow, and host of the Beauty Guide on W. He's also a professor at Ryerson University's Faculty of Communication and Design. Lendy Henry is founder of Dilectant Media and MODECANADAROCKS, with 3 decades of experience creating content and promotions for brands, including Aveda, Tiger of Sweden, and GQ. He also held multiple seasons of the matinee fashion ready-to-wear, staging premier Canadian designers from across the country. Lana Ogilvie has walked the runway for iconic designers, including Azzedine Alaïa, Karl Lagerfeld, and Sonia Rykiel. She is the first Black model to sign an exclusive contract with CoverGirl Cosmetics in 1992, following which she was an on-air host at Fashion Television. She is also founder of Lana Ogilvie Cosmetics and Strawberry Jewelry. Sabah Kwao is parlaying 25 years of design, marketing, and innovation expertise into his newest venture, Wealthy Works Daily, a financial services product launching in September. His prior work includes launching the Toronto Raptors, rebranding the CN Tower, and digital innovation projects in over 15 countries. Celia Sears is founder of Show Division in Milan, with 3 decades of experience providing backstage creative support and logistics for top-tier fashion shows, most recently Valentino Haute Couture and Jacquemus's Spring 2021 presentation in a wheat field near Giverny. Previously, she held stylist, director, and producer roles at talent agencies in Milan. George Sully is the maker of the iconic Star Trek Starfleet booth, which is in the permanent collection at the Battis Shoe Museum. He is co-founder of shoe brands House of Hela and Sully Wong, and the founder of Black Designers of Canada, the first ever comprehensive index celebrating Black excellence in design. Elise Wilson is a passionate advocate for social justice, BLM, and anti-bullying. Her unique beauty and multi-ethnic heritage has been pioneering change since her breakout Fall/Winter 17 season. Her first show season included Alexander Wang, Marc Jacobs, Maison Margiela, and Yeezy. I think even these brief biographies convey the collective reach of our panelists, whose work has touched every area of the fashion industry. Now that I've given the audience a crash course in accomplishments, I'd like each of you to add nuance. So the first question is, what is your creative mark or style that makes you different from another professional in your line of work? In other words, what defines your creative identity? So this question was prompted by something Len said to me ahead of the panel, that Blackness is wrongly considered monolithic. To quote Haitian-American designer Victor Glamour, Black people aren't a monolith. We don't all have the same point of view and outlook or direction. In other words, being Black doesn't mean you have the exact same references and influences as a Black colleague in the fashion industry or otherwise. And so in asking this question, I'd like to explore the breadth of identities that exist amongst us. Now, Vanessa, I would love to start with you. Len recalls a hilarious expression you shared at a panel you participated in last year, which is, put your stank on it. So I'm gonna give you the floor.
Okay, you have to say it stank though. You have to.
I look to you.
So it sort of was my way of, when you're talking about your creative identity, about your creative mark and like your point of difference, and that is ultimately what is going to lead you to your greatest execution of your creativity. So you can call it style or stank or magic. But for me, my creative identity, interestingly enough, was largely shaped by the barriers and the boundaries that I kind of may have come up against. Whether it was not feeling like it didn't belong, or actually not belonging, whether it was not looking like everybody or not looking like everybody enough, whatever it was, I felt left out of a conversation. And I didn't even know what conversations were taking place, or even what room those conversations were taking place in. And those boundaries forced me to develop my creativity in a way that I had to push through, constraints. I had to push through barriers. I had to find ultimate other ways, other solutions. I had to try to do things differently. And I had big dreams, and working within constraints, it helped me to actually be more agile, think differently, and really be an observer as much as someone who's taking part in something. So yeah, so I would say the stank really, it's a little bit of an attitude, sure. But largely it comes from being focused on inclusion and community and communication. And that's less about what you wear and more about like who you are.
Great answer. Let's go to Natasha next.
Yeah, mine like really jumps off of what Vanessa has shared. For me, I always say the type of content I'm really passionate about creating really comes from an inclusive and intersectional lens. And that all stems from my lived experience as a woman of color. To get really specific, as a Jamaican St. Lucian woman of color who grew up in a very white dominated community in Western Canada, and just like never seeing herself reflected in the people around her, and who loved consuming media, as I still do today. But again, never really seeing stories I felt like spoke to me, that like really told my narrative. And I really struggled with my identity for years, and really fought, I can say like I fought my Blackness. And I just really wish I had content that I just felt like made me feel like, I'm more than enough, that I belong, that my type of beauty is beautiful. And I know that type of feeling of feeling excluded is far from just mine. You speak to any person of color, and I'm sure that will ring true to them too. So I just really strive to create content where I try and put that mark as much as possible.
Thank you for sharing, Natasha. Let's go to Richard.
I'd like to say, my introduction to the industry was, I was born in Jamaica, raised in Jamaica, and Chinese Jamaican, and my experience was much like a lot of people. There's a neutrality about our existence. We're sitting in that, we're neither here or there. Coming into the business was difficult for me, but it also helped me define who I was, and I used it. To be honest with you, the business became a way of defining who I was and traveling to places that I'd never been before, emotionally and spiritually. I was on the front end of the camera for a few years, and then I moved to production and behind the camera, where actually that's where my real passion is. And in short, what I love to do now, and I think if it's going to be my stank, is I love supporting the people that I work with, whether they're the models or the hair and makeup artists or the photographers. It's a more behind the scenes role, but it's lifting them up and giving them opportunity.
Wonderful. Let's go to Steve.
Hey guys, I'm a picture maker, so as far as my identity, I guess I push my identity through my images, and I guess when I started photography like almost 3 decades ago, like there wasn't a lot of Black faces within the industry. Like, can kind of count on one hand how many Black shooters there were, like in 1990. I'm sure all the people on the panel remember, like Michael Chambers, myself, Patrick Nichols. Like there wasn't really anybody else. Michael Chambers was doing a gallery style, and Patrick Nichols and myself were shooting portraits. For me, I guess going back to the question of identity, I have a style, I think, that comes out through my pictures, which is like a straight up modern approach to making photographs that I feel like is modern and timeless. When it comes to being a person of color, I've always treated people of color with a certain light. I've found people say about my work, like, oh my God, you treat Black skin like so beautifully. It's like, really, I try to treat all skin beautifully because we're all beautiful. It's just, for me, because I'm a visible minority, I would always push visible minorities in my portfolio. I would always go to the agency, and funny, I'm a Black man, and they'd be like, hey, we got this great Black girl for you to shoot. So in the beginning, it was all about me giving people who look like me proper light. I think I would like to say Ian Hilton, who is a stylist that I met years ago. He was like really the first stylist who saw me when I was 19, and it's like, you're talented. Nobody in the industry looks like you. You should be a fashion photographer. Like, let's get this. So, I mean, to sum up, just touching on inclusion, I feel like it's super important for all of us to like help the people who look like us, because I mean, I'm not trying to say like it's an us and them. As you can look at my work, like I show all faces from all different ethnic backgrounds, but I just feel like I like to give the same kind of light to faces that look like me that that I guess other photographers give to faces that look like them. Like I really feel like it's important with our identity and with our identity to elevate our image. And I'm in the business of elevating people.
Beautifully stated. Let's go to Charmaine.
Thank you. Well, like all the other beautiful ladies on this panel, I'm defined by my land of my birth. And I was born in Jamaica, and I spent the first 8 years of my life in Jamaica being schooled. I lived through, as a child, mind you, but I lived through Jamaican independence. So I have a vague understanding of what colonialism was like to my parents and my grandparents. And I grew up in a culture that adored pageantry and beauty, beautiful women and their pageantry. So it's not surprising that I was attracted to the beauty and fashion industry. And when we emigrated here and I made it to university, I had the nerve to try and do my thesis on the emergence of a Canadian fashion industry in journalism. And there was hardly any research to be found. But lo and behold, I hung in there, and I was part of a wave, not the first generation to make their mark, maybe the second and the third. And I came in on the shoulders of other Black models and other producers who'd been working here. And I was able to find a spot for my talent. And I'm lucky that that happened. I know many people who have talent who did not find the opportunities, but I was fortunate, and I thank the people who gave me those opportunities. And they were meaningful. They were also very difficult as well to navigate. But as I moved on, I always had in my mind to try and bring in and introduce as many colleagues, my own Black colleagues, as I could, no matter where. And where I really enjoyed this function actually was at CHATELAINE magazine, because it was national and there was an opportunity and it wasn't glamour. It was about real people, as we like to say. And I really enjoyed that. And as my career has progressed now, and I've been through and had the opportunity to see the development of Alana and a Vanessa and a Natasha, it is nothing but pride to be able to say, yes, we are making strides. Now, as a professor, I look at the next generation and I say, what do they need? What can we do for them? I'm committed to try and creating something I didn't have, which was a base where I could go and research Canada's Black creatives and say, oh my goodness, do you know that there was a model who got the first contract for CoverGirl right here? She went to school just up the street. Yes, it's within our grasp. So in terms of my identity, I think I've always tried to be thoughtful, to be inclusive, and just to appreciate beauty in general. That's my brand, I hope.
I love it. Let's go to Len.
Hi there. I just want to, thank publicly all of my colleagues here. This was an idea that came to me and reached out to a few people, and the energy was incredibly encouraging. And I want to just tip my hat to all of them for giving this power and drive and walking along with this. I want to thank MELANI Beauty, Melanie Chong, who was a model when I produced shows years back. I said, Mel, do you want to do this? She said, oh my goodness, I think we need to stand shoulder to shoulder. I'll join you. I'll help you make this happen. Brill Communications, Desha, I'll get that right. Desha just jumped on this and said, I'll do this with you. Sabak Kuo, who's one of our panelists, is a marketer that I respect hugely. And he came on to help us frame this and shape it and send the right messaging. Celia Sears, whom I've known for many years from Show Division, came on also to help to drive this. Of course, Psychotherapy, Susan Langdon, Davo at Elite helped to introduce me to Odd Freckles, or Elite as her proper name is. And I'm so thrilled to have a young voice who is actually part Indigenous and part Black here with us. So she has much to share with us later. Vicky Milner at CAFA, and Ewan Cassidy, who's handling the tech backstage, I think is really great. I think our goal here is to walk away with great ideas, and I think everybody is going to surprise you and share with you and shock you and love you. And we recently lost John Lewis, and he left a really strong message, and I'm going to read this to you. Though I may not be here with you to urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe, in my life I have done all I can to demonstrate the way of peace. The way of love, nonviolence is the excellent way. Now it's your turn to let the freedom ring. And so, we've come together to hopefully help you, to share our experiences and our successes with you, to inspire you to let freedom ring. I think that's very important. So my stank, there was a couturier by the name of Winston Kong who took me under his wing when I was a young startup. He liked me right away, and I was part of his family. He made very expensive dresses for very wealthy ladies to stomp around at the Royal Winter Fair in the muck and mud. I thought, wow, this is so decadent. This is crazy. I said, Winston, how do you take an emerald silk taffeta ball gown, skirt, a yellow bodice, a pink cabbage rose at her hip, and tons of jewelry and red lips, and you sell it for so much? He said, well, it's my charm, Lenny. And the fact is, I'm Jamaican. And I realized that it's his Jamaicanism that made his color, made his cocktail dresses, made his chic. He opened my eyes to chic women, Diane Carroll, Munia at Saint Laurent, all of these great, elegant Black women. And I got to appreciate that. So I thank Winston for that. It was the way that I started to produce shows. That's how I lit shows, that I offset the color of a dress with a contrasting backlight and played with color so that there was this beautiful tableau when a scene opened. That was my thing. Years later, I got to work with the great Patrick Kelly. And Patrick, through her sheer will, Melanie Diamond was this firebrand at Simpsons. Then it was Simpsons, now it's the Bay. Pardon me? Pardon me?
Just remembering Simpsons.
Okay. First it was Simpsons, now the Bay. Very wide establishment, Arcadian court. Melanie said, I'm bringing Patrick Kelly to Toronto. And he is like the hottest, she said he was hotter than a firecracker or something, she said. And I want you to cast it mostly aggressively Black. That's the way Patrick would have done it. And in my mind, I already started feeling Jamaica. I already started to understand myself as a Black man, as a producer. And I said, wow, what a great opportunity. Patrick's thing was, he took the American South with him. He parodied all of the iconography, the buttons and the bows and the cards and the boaters that the Southern people used in their daily lives. And he made it all very chic, you know? And Patrick was a big, big star. So he was the first American designer to be invited to the Chambre syndicale. He was invited by Pierre Berger of Saint Laurent. And by the time he got to Paris, he started riffing on.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry, it's long. So I shall say in the end, these people were examples to me that you bring your culture with. And this, you know, this is really one's thing. It's how you feel, how you travel, where you're from. That is the thing.
Beautiful. Let's go to Lana.
So just what I'm seeing and hearing from everybody is that you know, we as Black people have come from so many different places, and as any creative, you're going to bring your background with you. You know, that's going to come out in your work, come out in how you are as a person. It's part of you. I mean, I'm so proud of my Jamaican and Grenadian heritage. You know, like we had a big community in Toronto, you know, that I grew up in, a very Caribbean community, a very West Indian household. I do, like, one of the things that I find though, like, especially in conversations with creative people, with artists, you know, like I had a conversation in New York, there's a guild called the Black Artists and Designers Guild. It's become very well known. They've done a lot of active things within the art community, within the fashion community, within things like that. And I was speaking with the founder last summer. And one of the things, I'm an artist, I'm an illustrator, trained in illustration, I'm a bench jeweler, I have a jewelry company, I have my skincare company, and I'm model. So certainly as a creative, you know, modeling is not, you as a model really are not the creative force behind a shoot, behind a picture. That's the photographer, that's the art director, that's the magazine, that's the hairdresser, the makeup artist, but we are kind of just like the canvas. But within my other things, you know, after talking to this woman from the Black Artist Design Guild, one of the things though that, and this comes back to the whole thing of Black people, which we're getting to later, seeing as one group, you are expected within what you do as a creative to somehow you can't just create. You have to create with this background of, I am Black, I'm going to be political, I'm going to make some kind of a statement, I'm going to XYZ, you know? So like when you're hired as a designer and you're Black, they're hiring you because they want some street cred, they want some urban cool, they want something like that. When you're hired as a filmmaker, you're supposed to make some statement about political climate, do a historical piece, a biopic, do a da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You know, like it's rare that you have a Black movie director like Ava DuVernay who makes A Wrinkle in Time, which is just a fantasy story. You're expected as a creative to do all this stuff. Like, you know, so I'm a jeweler and my jewelry does not, you know, use African prints. It doesn't have beads. It doesn't have kente cloth. It's just jewelry, right? When I paint, when I draw, a lot of it's abstract. It's not making, it's not representational like most art is supposed to be. If you're Black these days, if you reference all the people out there, Kehinde Wiley, Kerry James Marshall, Lorna Simpson, you know, on and on and on. And even if it's abstract, you're kind of put in this box. You're expected to make some statement. What I would like to see for Black creative people, for any kind of ethnicity creative people, just create. When does the weight, no, it's not the weight, when does the expectation from other, you know, the people in power of you having to make this statement because of this. Why can't we just make it? You know, like I make stuff, my jewelry, and you know, I'm sure people meet me and then are like, oh, you're Black. Well, yeah, you know, my jewelry is just, it's very simple, clean, quality, timeless, elegant. It doesn't have all this, you know, stuff that they expect you to have if you're a Black jeweler. You know what I mean? And what does that even mean? Like, I create stuff, and if people like it, that's great. But I don't, what I find hard is having to make this kind of the expectation of the statement of, you know, that your art is making some bold statement out there because you're Black. And so I kind of think, like for me, I don't necessarily do that. I think my stank or my mark is the avoidance of, is people having to look at it purely, you know, without not having any knowledge of who that person is behind it. Either it's beautiful or it's not beautiful, but there's no context for you to create a prior judgment.
Well stated. I really resonate with that. Let's go to Sabah.
My creative identity is probably that balance between being on the business side and the creative side. I studied design at OCAD, but before that had done a Bachelor of Commerce in Marketing and bookended that with an MBA. So I'm often sitting in the room, sometimes as a creative person, where I'm expected to be a business voice, and on the business side, where I'm expected to be a creative voice. And I'm comfortable approaching a problem on both sides, but I would say that creativity by far is the driver, because, you know, everyone creative I know is a magician in some way. You make things come out of thin air. And I say to creative people all the time, you have to take your skill very seriously. Creativity is the most valuable resource on the planet, and it's our job to move ideas forward. Capital, resources, everything is going to follow ideas, and that comes from creative people. So while I sit on both sides, creativity is the operating system, the absolute driver.
That's great. Let's go to Celia.
Hello, everyone. It's an interesting question in terms of what defines your creative identity. I was born in England. My parents are Caribbean, and I grew up in Canada, and I grew up in Oakville, Ontario. So I'm basically a small town girl who just sort of moved forward thinking that it's okay to be me. And being in small town Ontario and being one of the few Black families that there were, you stood out just because you stood out. And so it was important to sort of understand or have a grasp of what I thought was important. Obviously, coming from a Caribbean background, there are certain rules and regulations in the house in terms of if you are going to do anything, just make sure that you do it twice as good as anybody else. And I'm sure that if there's anybody of color who is listening to this, they have heard the talk. And the talk is, yes, you can do whatever you want, but whatever it is that you do, make sure that you're twice as good as anyone else. So how that sort of worked into my creativity, and actually to be very honest, my creative identity, I didn't realize what that was until I left Canada. And because I've been living in Milan for almost 20 years, people, when they see me, assume that I'm American. And the first thing I say is, no, I'm Canadian. I'm a very, very proud Canuck. And so what they usually see is Canadian style, not American style. Once I sort of say, okay, well, I'm Canadian, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I do, they can discern and decipher the difference between somebody who is American and somebody who's Canadian. Even with the accent, it's simple things like that. But I think what helped my creative identity was basically being proud of my Caribbean heritage, and also very much proud and embracing my Canadian roots, and just moving forward with the two, melding the two, and creating something that that I take with me day to day now.
That's great. Let's go to George.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for this line. Really appreciate it. I know for myself, my mother, seamstress, painter, chef. My father, jewelry maker. My brother, illustrator, painter, sculptor. My sister, voiceover. My brother, Alain, illustrator and toy maker now. Myself, graphic design, videographer, and of course, I'm a shoe designer, first and foremost, fashion designer as well. My background and my stank, my signature comes from a line of entrepreneurs that have never held me back. I've been lucky that way. I know that my parents from Haiti. I'm first generation Haitian Canadian, which is a rare breed in Toronto. There's a lot of population in Montreal, Montréal Noir, everybody in Montreal. Born in Ottawa, but lived in Toronto for 20 years. And I've always had a signature, very much like Lana, like I've had a signature that you couldn't really peg it as much as, you know, it's always been a clean, aesthetic, design orientated. You know, I've had a luxury lifestyle magazine called Chad Quarterly. We're one of probably the first original lifestyle, independent luxury lifestyle publications here in Toronto, which is funny because when a Mercedes or big brands tag Heuer, we go into these, me and my business partner, we were Black, obviously both of us, him being Jamaican, me being Haitian. You imagine that, right? You know, 20 years ago, you know, never that. It's just going to these meetings and then finding out that we're two Black men with a luxury lifestyle publication that you could probably never identify that was from two Black men, which is really crazy. And again, going back to my background and just with my family and entrepreneurship, it's always been one of those things where I've learned and I've honed my skill through my family and influences that I've seen around. But, you know, that's, I think, where I define most of my style and my aesthetic and just knowing how to do many of things. And they always say, jack of all trades, masters of none. I always say is better than a master of one. And now these days, and in these times that we live in, not knowing how to diversify and do many of things, you won't see a George Sully then. I try to teach that to a lot of the young students to say, you know what, being a master of one and then all of a sudden getting a pink slip, then you're going to guys like myself and saying, what else can I do? I'm struggling, I need to eat. And then I'll break something down and I'll package something better for that, you know, to customize to that person. But more importantly, it's one of those things that like, you know, I come from the school of where I've learned from my mother to have a few things and to know how to do things and be able to navigate when you don't have those opportunities. I've been given some opportunities and being taken, opportunities taken from me because of my color, because of a lot of things. I know that I see your faces here, that there's a lot of people that I'm meeting here for the first time and they're leaders in what they do. And I'm so proud to actually even be in this, in this, how do I say this, Brady Bunch squared configuration to really express myself. I know, Steve, I mean, you know, there are certain people here that like I followed and I've championed and I just, this part of my coming up, but there's a lot of other of women here and men here that I've meeting for the first time. And it's just crazy where we are. Anyways, I don't want to just, I know there's time on the, not enough time on the clock to talk, but just to say, my signature is from an entrepreneurial background and just knowing how to navigate doing many of things to get the job done. And that's why I think I find myself here, being able to contribute, so.
Great. And let's go to Elise.
Okay, so I would say that my looks really define my creative identity, especially in the modeling industry. I'm a very like rare Black ginger, like there's not a lot of people who look like me. And where I'm from, like growing up, I never had anyone or representation like for people who look like me. I had like Stacey McKenzie later on that I found out about, but yeah, growing up, there's it was more like predominantly white, and so I really struggled with my identity, and I always gravitated towards things that were different. And I think as I grow more and more, I'm learning more about my culture, Indigenous and Black. So I think my creative identity is always changing because I'm just now tapping into who I'm supposed to be now while I'm learning and progressing.
That's great. Thanks, Elise. So, as I was listening to your answers, I was noticing kind of two distinct themes. Some of you cite your cultural heritage as informing your work and it having a direct influence on what you do, and some of you don't. And both are equally valid. And I think that's a really important takeaway from listening to all of your answers. So now I want to move on to the civil rights movement that we're experiencing, which arguably is the reason for our gathering today. So protests have occurred over decades, and the founding of the Black Lives Matter movement in July 2013 renewed their focus. The most recent protests were ignited by the pandemic, which has exacerbated racial inequity and spread worldwide due to the May 25th murder of George Floyd. So my question is it different this time? And if so, how? And I just want to share some context to situate the audience. So in the aftermath of George Floyd's death, we saw a reckoning at a number of fashion and media brands, including Paper, Refinery 29, Condé Nast, and Hearst. In June, Tijane Thiam became the first Black director to join the board at Kering, which owns a number of luxury brands, including Gucci. Monroe Bergdorf joined L'Oreal's new diversity and inclusion board after calling them on their hypocrisy for posting "Speaking Out is Worth It" on Black Tuesday. So back in 2017, Monroe became L'Oreal's first ever transgender spokesperson, but was fired for calling out white supremacy. Also in June, Dario Calmese became the first Black photographer to shoot the cover of Vanity Fair. And closer to home, Samira Nasser, who is from Montreal, became the first Black editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar in its 153-year history. So this is all encouraging news, but the trickle-down effect from these high-profile hirings and firings remains to be seen. And so my question again is it different this time? And if so, how? So let's go back to Natasha first.
For sure. I personally have seen, I would say a slight shift. I feel like with the current movement happening, it's receiving a lot more momentum than there has been in the past. I do see more people joining in on the conversation, more non-Black voices, colleagues, acquaintances. So I have seen that personally from my lens. My hope though is what I'm seeing on social is that trickling to homes. Are those awkward, hard conversations happening among people and their friends and their family? I don't know. And in terms of the content I'm seeing at media outlets, I really hone in on the Canadian titles. I do see more content being produced by Black voices, by BIPOC voices. However, my thinking is I just feel currently what I'm seeing is really reactive to what's happening. And the trickle down effects is going to be long term. I want to see this come January, February, this time next year. That will be the true test for me. As much as people personally are checking in with themselves currently and being am I a part of the problem? What can I do to help? I hope media outlets specifically and the teams are checking themselves, checking the content they've created in the past and being how have we failed people? How can we bake in important storytelling into the everyday, to the weekly that we do? I just am really tired of the cyclical trend up, and then when things simmer down, you just don't see anything anymore. So that's my hope. Again, I've seen a shift, but I don't know if it's going to be long lasting.
Very fair. Let's go to Richard next.
I believe that there is a big shift. I believe that it's with what's happening through sport, which is usually my lens, what I see things happening. Kaepernick took a knee a few years ago, and it had some meaning. It resonated with some of us, but he lost his job. He was disenfranchised, disowned, and nobody really stood with him. We were mindful of what was happening, but it didn't have the same weight as it does now. So why is that? I think 8 minutes and 46 seconds is why. You know, the time it took to kill a man on video. You know what I mean? And we had to watch it. You know, we had to watch it. You know, honestly, the first time I saw it, I looked away and I couldn't believe I was actually watching this. You know, and I looked away, and then I actually forced myself to see it, because I think it's important that we all know that this actually happened for no reason. You know, so yeah, I think the shift this time is huge. It's huge, and I think still, to Natasha, to your point, where will we be in January? Where will we be in 2021 and 2022? You know, it's interesting. I'm going to share a story with you. I was seeing my osteopath, whatever, and she's white, and she was doing a treatment on me, and this subject came up, as it does everywhere. And she said, I can't talk about this with you. And I'm like, excuse me? When I talk to my other Black friends, I am pushed away. I don't understand. I'm white, so it's not my experience. And I went, for me, this is part of the problem, is that there are going to be conversations that are going to be had outside of this sphere. Okay, they're going to be had amongst white people, and I need her to have a voice for us in those arenas, because we're not going to be there. We're not going to be privy to that. You know, so coming back to it, I think the shift is that we need everyone to be on board and everyone to keep messaging and keep speaking about what's happened here. You know what I mean? And for me, yes, I see it as a huge shift. The momentum is the tricky part, Natasha. You know, it's how do we keep it going and keep it going and keep it going? And I think this forum, talking to, in my world, talking to my Caucasian friends about it, and saying, no, let's talk about it. You know what I mean? Let's have this discussion. You know, and to keep drawing them closer to us and not pushing them away because of our own bias too.
Let's go to Steve next. Oh, you're on mute, Steve.
The whole idea, sorry about being on mute there. The whole idea about this whole BLM is, for me, I want to take the angle of Black Lives Matter and Black business. We're all Black business people. Anyone feel like we're popular now? Suddenly? I mean, it's funny. It takes like 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It takes someone to die to suddenly, like, I'm walking down Queen Street and I see like a 65-year-old white man, and he's like nodding at me, like giving me, I'm like, okay, like now we're popular all of a sudden. And it's like, we've always been feared, right? But suddenly now we're feared and loved. Do you know what I mean? Which is also like a weird thing. I mean, you're walking down the street and you have people coming down and then walking around you. And it's like, okay, are they giving me 6 feet because of COVID? Or are they giving me 6 feet because of my beautiful Black strength and power? Like, right now, all of a sudden, I'm being hired more than ever. And I'm like, I'm the same Black man, I'm the same photographer, I'm the same talent that I've always been. But all of a sudden, now I'm popular? Like, listen, all of us here on this panel, we've been doing this. This isn't a new thing. Celia, 30 plus years, me 30 plus years. Like, we have 300, 400 years of experience on this panel alone in 12 people. And now we're popular? Now, like, how come Charmaine Gooden isn't getting the love for being one of the first Black editors? Like Vanessa Kraft, like, why on a global scale is not like what we've been doing in Canada like forever getting any attention? I mean, it's amazing that Black editors are now in the forefront. Just touching on Natasha's point, is this baked in, or is this going to be like in 18 to 34 minutes, BLM and the whole movement is going to be forgotten about? Like, these are questions that we ask ourselves. For me, I know when hip hop became popular in like 2000, 2001, when T-Chad dropped his magazine, when Sully and Chad dropped the magazine, like shot the first cover, like he was hiring people who looked like him. He was no fool like 15 years ago. So us people on the Len Henry, Richard Campbell sending me models, Celia said, like Sabah, we've all been doing things and all been supporting each other. Lana, I haven't had a chance to have you in front of my camera. Like,
I know,
oh my
we got to
gosh.
do that. We got to make that happen.
One day, my God. But what I'm trying to just touch on about, and going back to my initial point, it's Black Lives Matter and Black business. And suddenly now we popular. And how long is that going to last? That's Natasha's point. We've all, Celia's living in Milan. What's racism like in Milan for her? What's it like in Italy, where every third person is an invisible minority, where you are literally, I know, yes, there's Black Italian soccer players and blah, 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 but, and I've spent time in Italy, I spent 3 weeks there, but I know I was the only Black face in like in so many situations. So I'm hoping it's a long lasting shift, but as 500 years of history has taught us, it never really ended up working out like that. So that's my point.
Well said. Let's go to Charmaine.
I would have to echo many of the points already mentioned by the panelists. Is this real? So let's take a perspective. And what I did to prepare for this was I spoke to some of the elders, you know, I said, gosh, surely the world must have been outraged when Nelson Mandela was in prison. Surely they were outraged when, what is so different about George Floyd? Why is this happening now? And we said it's amplification, right? News gets out further, more people have access to it. You don't have to depend on someone to tell you the news. You can get it yourself. So that is different. But we also identified that scale for scale, back then, now, amplification. What really is different? Is it different? Is the mess, are we getting any further? I don't know. I really and truly don't know. Lots still to do, right? We still have to keep pressing the work. There are differences. I notice differences. Like Natasha said, yes, PR people have been reaching out to me. What can we do? We never knew what the problem. And you're right, Richard, we must engage them because, and I'm gonna use this word again, I think this is my second time, decolonialization. We must decolonialize our minds, and that is both Black and white, and it runs deep. That is what we're talking about. Now, in that are all the institutions and things that are running, and we have seen when, things collide, race and politics and fashion and everything. Oh, it gets very heated. So we know that it's not something that's gonna change easily at all. Each of us keep pushing forward. What feels good to me is that I hear words like BIPOC, which means that we are now not just standing for Black people, but Indigenous and people of color. That feels different, that there is more connection. As I said, I'm working on a project that is trying to document and archive the achievements of the Black creatives. And I'll tell you, the first group that reached out to me were the Indigenous groups. 2 Indigenous groups reached out and said, can we be a part of it? I said, of course, we're fighting the same struggle. That feels hopeful to me. And younger people getting involved. I see now my role is to keep that movement going. I can share the truth of my journey with you. I can tell you that you're going to be the subject of microaggression. Things will happen, and you will have to, yes, continue, because you're working and you're representing and you're making a living and all that kind of stuff too. You're going to go through it just like we have, right? And what we keep pushing, we keep going on and on.
Let's go to Len.
I want to make a comparison. The first time BLM really made a mark in Toronto, a group of people decided to ambush the Gay Pride Parade and sat in at College and Young. Their demands were that they wanted more Black representation in the sort of administration of Pride and more acceptance for LGBTQ people. You know, Black LGBTQ people have a problem because, number one, family, community, country repels you. And so there is no home there. And when you reach out to a mainstream community and there's no home there, now you have no home. So those people at BLM Toronto really was just asking for a home. That's all it is. I guess ultimately, you know, they also didn't want police floats, and they were successful back and forth in making that happen. So there are no floats from the police because police are aggressive. And they managed to hire a Black executive director who put their books back on track. And now she has disappeared suspiciously. Nobody knows why she left the company, why she left the place. But at least some things did happen and some attention was drawn. There was huge pushback from the mainstream gay community. So it showed that even though in Black community you have no home, but also in the world you have no home. So they were founded in their point, but they were seen as aggressive, problematic, causing this disruption. I think in 2020, on the other hand, we have the Gen Zs to really thank for what's going on here. I think that these kids, the youth, want to approach life very differently, you know? I hope that Elise can share some of their perspective, her perspective with us. You know, there seems to be a sense that they have of, you know, community and taking care of home and taking care of each other and working together. The profile that, you know, that the Gen Zers are giving us worldwide, they've got the internet to share this information and everybody has come on board. So we've seen a bigger outcome. And now we see that the brands and marketers are responding because they know what their market is going to be. Without the Gen Z, who's going to be their buyers, they're going to be out of business. And so it's that young generation, Black and white, are Gen Zs. It's not, you know, white kids or Black kids. It's the next generation that is making the demands. And, you know, every young generation makes a mark, but I think this young generation has a lot of tools that can make some serious change.
That's a really great point. Let's go to Lana.
So just talking about how we might feel this looks different. Obviously, I mean, continuing on what everybody has said, you know, it's really, you can't really judge that until you look at it, you know, next year, 5 years, 10 years. But I will say I have been working on this kind of stuff in the fashion industry since the 90s. Beth Ann Hardison had this group in the mid 90s, early 90s called the Black Girls Coalition. It was a group of Black models, you know, all of us, everyone from Naomi to Karen Alexander to Veronica Webb, Kara Young, on and on. Rashomba, you know, Beverly Johnson, Iman was also involved, you know, and that was a time in fashion when the waif came in, that heroin chic look came in, you know, and everything got completely whitewashed, you know, and designers would do these shows and it would just be like void of any color in the model, you know, the models that they showed. You'd go to a casting, oh, we're not booking any Black models. That's a whole other story. That's something they've been saying forever, but whatever. So anyways, that was a time, the magazines, you know, it just became one thing. So we had this group and we did all these initiatives to create change, create awareness, to try and, you know, advocate for diversity within the industry. And sure, you know, people did something maybe the next season or maybe for 2 seasons, you know, changed this, it changed that. We had a lot of panels, we did some events. It didn't make long-term change. It made no long-term change whatsoever. I think the difference now is sadly, not sadly, but the reason why it has changed is because of the, you know, the catalyst of George Floyd's death. Black Lives Matter movement that happened a few years ago. Again, we didn't see much change from that. The Black Lives Matter movement that is happening now is worldwide. That has not really happened. This kind of worldwide attention, you know, I mean, certainly most of us here are talking about fashion and creative, but this attention internationally, globally, from all kinds of industries, and not just creative industries. You know, you could look at any industry, whether it's they're all having to come to terms and reckon with how their racially biased policies have arrived at this current place, and needing to confront it, make a statement about it, and make some changes within their organization. So the difference now is that it has become an international movement. I mean, you're seeing it in every country in the world. That didn't really happen before. So I'm hopeful that because it is so global, and people really see, I mean, they're having these protests in Australia. I mean, you know what I mean? You're just like, it's not just New York, it's not just Toronto, it's not just Los Angeles, places that have like big Black populations, or England or something. It's all of these countries all over the world where Black, there's really not a lot of Black people living there. And so I'm hopeful that this can create more lasting change than what has happened before. That you can only be hopeful.
I hope so too. Let's go to
Following on Lana's point about it being worldwide, you couldn't have seen it coming, and we dare not miss the moment. There's momentum that we could have never, there's no amount of marketing in the world that would have created momentum like this. And in a sense, when we see this kind of moment, we're all, I'll call it radicalized. Incremental change isn't enough. We need to see a quantum change. And when we have this suspicion that this moment could go away, we dare not let this moment pass. So in our capacity as entrepreneurs and creative people, we have to do something about it. I sometimes describe the last 25, 50 years as a bubble. We thought progress was being made, and now you see, just from the kinds of ugly things that we've seen surface, it's as if not enough progress was made. So incremental change wasn't enough. We have to make a quantum leap. And that's what I think is different this time around. We just can't let this pass.
Really well said. Let's go to Celia.
I consider this a global shift, a major global shift. We saw Black Lives Matters protests in Italy, in Milan, in my city, all across the world, all across Europe, in some of the most obscure places. I think it's touched everyone globally, and I think that social media has a lot to do with it. And now everything is real time, everyone is seeing everything, and I think that has a major role to play in terms of also maintaining the momentum to keep us going and to keep the movement going. But I also believe that it has emboldened many of us to speak out, to say something, to make a point. For us at Show Division, and ironically, going back to someone's point, I think it was Lana's point, sorry, about people not knowing that you're Black. People have no idea. Show Division, basically, we provide the backstage support and logistics on key shows worldwide. So the big four: New York, London, Paris, and Milan. I'm the CEO, I started the company, and I'm this little Black girl from Oakville. Nobody knows, basically nobody knew until very recently, that I am a Black woman at the helm of this company. What I have done, because I am a Black woman at the head of this company, I have taken the opportunity to reach out to the governing bodies of Milan Fashion Week, of the British Fashion Council, the CFDA, and the Chambre de Syndicat, and basically we've started an initiative in a way to end what's happening backstage, just in terms of what we deal with. We deal with hair and makeup. So what I am proposing to them has to do with hair and makeup, and making sure that any Black girl who goes backstage will have somebody who is proficient doing their hair, and any makeup artist who goes backstage has a full range of colors that will cover any and everyone. And these are just sort of basic inequities that are backstage, and it's just enough is enough. And so thanks to this movement, thanks to this moment of time, I'm using my voice And actually there will be change in the future. We are working on the initiative. We're in talks with everyone, and so far the response has been very positive. The logistics of it is crazy, but nonetheless, the goal is at the end of the day, any Black model who walks backstage will be treated as any white model backstage when it comes to hair and makeup. So it gives us all hope.
That's amazing, Celia. Thanks for taking that on. Let's go to George.
Oof, well, man, oh man, what makes it different? It's the accountability. For the first time in history, white Canada is owning up to systemic racism. Admitting the problem is the first step to fixing the problem. Because I'll tell you this, there is before Blackout Tuesday, and then there's after Blackout Tuesday. Before Blackout Tuesday, the world is fine. There's no racism here. I mean, everything is just hunky-dory. Nobody knows nobody definitely knows who I am. How could you? After Blackout Tuesday, for people and corporations who literally had the balls to put a Black JPEG saying that now, today, we're going to stand behind Black people. We're going to do this. We're going to hug a Black person a week, every once a week. We're going to kneel down. We're going to do all these things for Black people. They had the balls to do this. This is accountability for the first time that white Canada has never had in the history. Everybody can just do anything they wanted, tiptoe and dance all over us. Like, I can promise you, I have so many stories, not enough time, but so many stories are where I've been marginalized. But as a Black man, whether angry or whatever you want to call me, by myself, that's not enough. The fact that I said, you know what? If white Canada wants to stop talking and listen, this is what makes it different. This is what makes it different. This is what makes somebody like myself stand up and say, you know what? I can't be by myself. I'm going to organize. I'm going to start something and bring as many designers that I know, more than 10, more than 20, I bet more than 50. Guess what? In 4 days of putting a call out, I got over 200 designers, narrowed it down to 130, got it to 160. Now we have designers standing with me saying, hey, you know what? It's not just a Black guy who just can't get into Hudson Bay and I'm angry. I'm in Hudson Bay. But the point being is that this is what makes it different. Accountability. There is a paper trail. There is a marker. There is somewhere where I can say, whether, like what Natasha was saying, you know, how long is this going to go for? I don't know, but I didn't invent cancel culture, but you best believe that whether you're looking for a halo, whether I'm dragging you kicking and screaming now as a corporation, either or, you're going to have to make a decision whether you're going to add me, you're going to include me, and or else. And you know what? It sucks that cancel culture exists, and I don't put that on anybody, but guess what? For all this time, anybody and anything can do anything they want without no accountability. This is what makes it different. You literally put yourself on Front Street on blast. And if you don't, if you do, thank you. But if you don't though, and that's what makes a difference for good or bad, it's okay, whether you're looking for a halo, whether you're looking to atone for your sins, of all your sins. Photographers, stylists, stores, independent boutiques. We've never been in your store, but we've always been in your store. The music you play, the styling on the shelf, guess where it comes from? Mm-hmm. This is our culture. We've been, when I say marginalized, but we've been appropriated, remixed, put back on the shelf and call it something else. And all of a sudden, my brand doesn't fit your demo. I am your demo. Just to say, it is different, whether you like it or not. There is difference. There is a change. It's coming. And it's not anymore by the one angry Black guy, which, hey, I've done really well. I know I've made over $1 million. I know I have. It's hard for Canada, has always been hard for Canada to celebrate success that looks like me. So I could make all the money in the world, but I will never get that cover. I will never get that coverage. I will never get these things that's given to so many so easily. I've watched, I'm here. I live downtown, like I'm looking at the city skyscraper right now. I've always been right here. Steve knows. I've always been here. He shot my first cover. That was 20 years ago we were doing these things. It was a luxury publication with advertisers, some of the best.
George, sorry.
So, I know, I'm sorry.
No, that's no.
Anyways, I told you that I was gonna get a little bit heated. Anyways.
Let's go to Elise.
George got me all choked up. I want to cry. Actually, one point, he's saying that Canada is admitting more to systemic racism, but we have leaders like Doug Ford saying Canada does not have the same deep systemic racism as America. And it's just such a huge slap in the face to all people of color in Canada. Like, you can't go around saying things like this. And so I think things are having these changes here, but it's a consistent conversation that we need to have nonstop. And I think it's very important for us to use our voices and to bring a lot of things to light. It needs to be a constant conversation that is happening in order for us to see change. And they're trying to make different changes within the fashion industry. Now I see they're trying to make it more diverse, and more conversations are coming up. But for me, it's kind of hurtful to me, I feel, because it's been conversations I've been trying to have on my own as a Black woman, and my voice wasn't heard. And it's very sad to me that it took George Floyd to die for me to be able to speak about not having stylists who can do Black hair, or not having the right makeup, or not having enough representation in the industry. It's odd for me to be able to speak about that because someone else passed away because of police brutality. It's two different things, but I'm hoping that it is a consistent conversation and something that is talked about all the time, because we as Black people have to speak about it all the time, and Indigenous. So I hope it's a frequent and constant conversation that everyone is going to have, because it at the end of the day, we're all human and we all need to speak about it, because it's not fair.
I agree. So a lot of you provided examples as to why BLM is different this time. Richard, you mentioned sports, and Colin Kaepernick. Len, you mentioned the involvement of Generation Z. Lana and Sabah, you mentioned BLM's global reach, both on the ground and digitally through social media. But some of you also hinted at why there's still so much further to go. So George, as you mentioned, here in Canada, we're only at step one, which is finally admitting we have a problem. Charmaine, you mentioned that in media, it's advertisers who are going to drive the biggest change in our industry. And actually that reminded me of the La Roche and Zendaya cover, totally spectacular, and the editorial for InStyle's September issue that was released last week. And from what I understand, they were given carte blanche by editor-in-chief Laura Brown, no interference from advertisers, which is amazing. But if all of you have said, we're going to be watching upcoming issues really closely to make sure this isn't a one-off, that come October, advertisers aren't back to dictating terms of engagement. So let's move on to question 3. So my next question is about data collection and hiring practices. A number of grassroots movements have emerged in June. 2, which are spearheaded by Canadians, are incredibly useful and elegant solutions. One of them is Black Designers of Canada by our very own George Sully, and 15% Pledge by Toronto native Aurora James, founder of shoe brand Brother Vellies. 2 more came out of New York. The Kelly Initiative, named for late designer Patrick Kelly, who our very own Lendy Henry has worked with, is signed by 250 fashion professionals And it petitions the Council of Fashion Designers of America to conduct an industry census and make public its findings on the racial makeup of employees of its member organizations, and asks participating companies to pledge to create equity for Black talent. The other is the Black in Fashion Council, which is founded by Teen Vogue editor-in-chief Lindsay Peoples-Wagner and publicist Sandrine Charles, which will establish an equality index score to assist with the inclusion of Black employees. So my question is data collection necessary for hiring practices, or is data collection bureaucracy that delays badly needed change? And how else can we implement equitable hiring practices? So let's go to Richard.
I think it's very important. I think it's important. One of the things that I think we all agree on is accountability. And in collecting that data and understanding how you're hiring and who you're hiring, we'll hold people to that. In my comments, I actually talked about, a blind hire, where you actually don't see someone. You never actually see their face, Can you actually hire someone without ever being face-to-face with them? Look at their resume, interview them, but never actually see them. And what would that look like? So yeah, I think it's paramount. And I think, yeah, sure. I mean, we run the risk of harvesting that data and what becomes of it. But I think it would be an interesting thing to actually look at and see what it ends up being. It's going to be one of those things that we're going to be shifting moving anyway, right? So let's start there and see what becomes of it.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to Steve. Oh, you're on mute, Steve.
I think we're all muting to try to stop the background noise. Just touching on Richard's point, I think that I worry about tokenism. That's my thing. It's like, hey, let's put Elise in this campaign because we're trying to be different and cool, but really the people in power are white faces, the people signing the checks are white faces, and it's just essentially like using an image like Elise, using an image like Lana to say, hey, we're conscious and all that stuff, but really it's just tokenism. And for me, I think that's what the question comes down to is this a real shift in equality, or is this just a shift into tokenism? Richard's point on blind hiring, like essentially hiring the best person for the job, whether they're Black, white, Chinese, Asian, have a disability, have limbs missing, like blind, whatever, like they're the best person for the job, being able to hire them blind, amazing. I mean, what we're entering into is essentially, what's it called? Where we're putting Black people in the forefront, literally as like affirmative action is the word that I'm looking for. Like, are we entering into another time of affirmative action where it's just like, well, we need one Black agent in the agency. So that's Richard. We need one Black photographer on the crew. That's me. We need one Black designer in Canada. So that's going to be solid. Like, are we entering into a place where I'm now getting the job because I'm Black, not because I'm talented? Like, for me, I want to get the job because I'm the most talented person. It shouldn't matter whether I'm Black, white, yellow, blue, or whatever. So there's something to be said for that, like the best person for the job. But that's always skewed. That's always biased. So yes, the data collection does, it helps. Like, yes, we're using data to say that we're hiring visible minorities, but the long or the short of it is, I think what we've all just been fighting for is an equal playing field. That's all we want, is a clean slate. I just want to know that I have exactly the same amount of chance to get this opportunity as the next person, not more chance because I'm a cool Black guy or less chance because I'm a cool Black guy. Like, I just want equality. And the tokenism, I feel like it's going to be super quick to spot. And you really just have to follow the money. Like, who has the money that's signing the checks, and are they being really a conscious individual and doing this for the right reason, or is this just tokenism?
Right. Let's go to Vanessa.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, even this conversation around tokenism, I think, of course, nobody wants to be the token, and we want to be hired because we are qualified. But I think it's also very important that we all acknowledge, if we're coming up for a big race And we haven't been allowed to train for that race. We haven't been given good food to eat before that race. We don't even know how long the race is. We can't really compete with the people that are in the race with us. So that's like a whole separate conversation, but it's very murky between tokenism versus representation versus where we're even at. In terms of data collection, though, I would say that that's very important to me. And data collection and the way that we work with data, there are places where the numbers don't lie. And for example, like with my job, the numbers don't lie. I live by my numbers. What is our engagement on social media, on our website? What is our newsstand? And we all know the lines about Black people don't sell magazines or Black people don't sell. And I'm here to say Black people are good for business. Not only are we the innovators of all culture, but even in my experience within ELLE and with what we've done here, you know, okay, obviously when we have Beyonce on the cover, she kind of does okay. You know, it's Beyonce. All right, can't think why she does so well. But we had a cover last year with Winnie Harlow and Stefan James. They are Jamaican Canadians. We shot that cover in Eglinton West in Little Jamaica, which is not really a popular location for big international fashion magazines to shoot. And that issue and that cover, that sold equitable, almost equitable to what Celine Dion sold for us, our queen, Celine. So there's information there to be had. And what I learned the most out of that, because often there's this question, do we need a huge A-list celebrity? Well, sure, you do. But also what happened here was a recognition from the community coming out, the community seeing representation, pride, excitement, and us saying these are the next king and queen of fashion and film, and like, this is it. So I think that data does matter because I have those numbers now and I can use that. That is power for me. You know, and I think also I have to admit, I have the privilege of having the platform to be able to do this. And we don't have enough people with the platform. We all know what we're capable of. We all know what we do, but you've got to be able to have that spotlight to shine it as well. So in other words, I don't know the answer, but I know that data matters when you're trying to prove something and it comes down to money and business. And us figuring out how to harness that and communicate that is definitely one way to go forward, just in general, of like forwarding our people.
That's really compelling. Let's go to Charmaine. You're on mute.
Okay. I want to pick up on a couple of threads that a number of the other people have spoken about. You're absolutely right, Vanessa. We were lucky to have those platforms, and you do the best you can and you look out for each other as best you can. So, right. And data speaks. Data, as you say, will tell you how many Black shop where, where do we spend our money? And part of the change is galvanizing ourselves to start letting our money talk, right? So there's that. Steve, can I say to you, you are never being hired just because you're Black. Trust me, you gotta be damn good to even get in the door, all right? And you're probably twice as good. You've had to like take stuff that probably other people haven't. So it's never just because you're Black, you've always had to be better. I would hesitate to say that a lot of us feel that need to be the best, of course, but yeah, we're the first, we're out there representing, absolutely. I can tell you that from the education side too, representation of Black instructors and bringing more curriculum with the Indigenous and Black culture in is a huge challenge for them. Working at it, but we need way more presence. Sabah, you mentioned something about having to seize this moment. That I agree with you. As you said, yes, it's revealed that all the changes we thought were, monumental were actually incremental. And so now here we are again, and the voice is amplified, and it is up to another generation. But yes, we must seize it now. right? So thank you.
Thanks, Charmaine. Let's go to Len. You're on mute.
Who?
To Len.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I think absolutely yes. Obviously, data does matter. You know, bravo Vanessa, you know, for making those numbers and making the covers different. You know, I'm old enough to have been around Toronto when magazine covers were always white and everything was always white, and you know, so it's great to see that diversity on covers is making a mark, and it's strong. I founded this thing called MODECANADAROCKS to benefit an organization called Eva's Place. And Eva was a little Jamaican woman who came here in the 60s, little but she talawa, they say. And she came with a lot of might. And she fought, she came as a domestic, and so her skills were downgraded. She came just to do housework in 1956. She battled with North York. She said, I know there are homeless youth in North York. I know they're having problems fitting in. And you know, the mayor at the time and the lawmakers said, no, we don't have that in North York. She must have done something to demonstrate to them that there are kids who need help. And ultimately, the first Eva's Place was indeed opened in North York. That's now grown, that organization has now grown to be the top 10 high impact charity across Canada, created by a little Jamaican woman. You know, the numbers that the organization now uses to raise support, 29% are LGBTQ, 30% are Indigenous, 28% are from racialized communities, 42% have reported, you know, suicide attempts, 59% have had some kind of victimization. And this is what's happening with the youth. And so that organization uses those numbers to build awareness. They were able to raise $11 million recently to build their next shelter. So I think every step of the way, you've got to hold people accountable. You've got to show the numbers. And I don't know that it's going to be about, you know, as Steve's point was earlier, I don't think that that's always the case. I think those numbers are always really important. At some point, we hope to get past that. But right now, we need the numbers to say, look, this is it. We're holding you to the fire. This is what we've got to do going forward.
I agree. Let's go to Anna.
So yeah, just to continue with that, like what everybody's been saying, I mean, I think that the data collection is important to see, you know, how much things have changed, how much things continue to change, and use that to hold people accountable, but also to use that to show that to show concretely what that value is. You know, Vanessa was just saying about the cover and with Winnie Harlow on it selling as many as a cover with Celine Dion. So, you know, that's concrete. There's no lies in that number, those numbers. When people want to say Black doesn't sell as well, or, you know, you get TV shows like The Bachelor, oh, the Black, you know, Black Bachelor doesn't work as well, you know, and all this kind of junk that comes in that you hear, foolishness. So the data collection is concrete proof. But another thing I wanted to come back to was Celia had been talking about hiring practices backstage. Again, this is something that can come to, which, you know, I mean, obviously you're doing it on a show level, but on a print level, which is more what I do, you know, again, the data, I mean, I don't have hard data, but there should be some firm thing, because the data shows or would show that most makeup and hair artists, or it's hairdressers specifically, but makeup artists also, but hairdressers show up and to a job without the tools in order to do their job. Meaning I'm blow drying my hair, or they don't want to do their job, because I've been on enough jobs where it's not only, you know, and this is a thing where data would help. You know, you have to supply a course, people have to have taken this, so that the percentage of people that show up ill-equipped to do their job, which is the Black model's hair, would decrease. Because that still happens today. That's been happening to me for decades, where I show up on a job, someone doesn't know how to do my hair, they don't have the tools to do my hair looks bad, and in the end, who gets the blame? Who is the client calling? Who's the art director calling? My agent. Oh, Lana's hair didn't look good. So I'm not a hairdresser. You're not paying me to be a hairdresser either. But data in that kind of situation could change all that kind of stuff, because that's like a daily microaggression. You go to work and this kind of thing where person's not equipped to do your hair. They don't want to do your hair because it's like, oh, it's going to take so long. You know, I shouldn't have to deal with those microaggressions. And if there was more data on that, if there was more accountability on that, stuff like that would change. And I really do think that having that information, you know, everybody knows it, but because it's not concrete information, nothing's going to be done about it.
Let's go to Sabah.
So data is cumulative power, and without it, you're going to end up being overruled by subjective opinions. So think of all the positions that we can now defend because we have the data. Less than 2% of venture capital money goes to Black entrepreneurs. Less than 3% goes to women. Percentage of people who are assaulted by police when they're Black. If you didn't have that data, you would actually be powerless. Now, it's a dual-edged sword because data is a kind of hell. It's overwhelming, it's unrelenting. So you need to match that with a certain amount of data literacy because it can be distorted, and you're going to need to build a position that you understand how to defend with the data, but also to fight against distortion. So I think about these kinds of numbers all the time. Building a fintech company, you kind of know the odds against us just trying to raise money in the Canadian environment. We're in the middle of a $10 million raise. My investors are all Black, gay, and women, overwhelmingly in a fintech business. And I've got the data to say, I know why that is. It's not going to stop me from trying to do what I'm going to do. But if I didn't have that data, I would be a little bit blind as to what we're up against. So I'm absolutely a big data fan, even though I understand the risk and the downside, but it's an absolute necessity to be in the data business in every single business that we're in.
Let's go to Celia.
Interesting. I must admit, we have over 250 hair, makeup, and manicurists based worldwide. And I can't tell you how many of them are Black. Can't tell you how many are people of color. Can't tell you how many are gay, how many are straight. I have no idea, because we blind hire. When Richard was speaking about blind hiring, that's exactly what we do. You send in your work, and if your work is worthy, we will propose you to do a job. Yes, in an altruistic world, that's how it should work. And that's how I run the business. And on the other side of that, and as Lana was talking about in terms of accountability and making sure that those who are hired actually can do the job. This is part of the incentive of what we are doing right now, is to make sure, I can tell with the people that we hire, the people that we bring in, they are proficient to do all textures of hair, not just one texture. They have a full kit that they can do all colors of skin. Because, and that's what makes us the best at what we do, because we make sure that we have these kinds of vetting systems in place. All we're asking is that others do the same. So that could be a producer, that could be a designer. Those who are the stakeholders, those are the ones who hold the purse strings in terms of hiring the creative talent. They need to make sure that their producers are accountable to the fact that their artists, their talent must be proficient, must have something for everyone.
Let's go to George.
Very important. And the reason why I think it's very important, because I can tell you, it wasn't 20 years ago, but just probably 8 months ago, 90% of the top 10 designers you need to know in Toronto did include anybody Black, Indigenous, people of color. Not 10 years ago, 8 months ago. If we Google, everybody who's listening to this panel right now, I want you to Google right now and say Black designers, Canadian Black designers, and you will have the 3 tokens. I promise you, this was something that is just an 8-month problem. If I didn't have, and if I didn't amass a number to say, I know that there's more of us that exist, why are you just including these 3 for the past 10 years when there's so many of us? There's the young ones just coming up. There's the ones that are just getting their grip, and there's the veterans that are not just quote unquote athleisure, because that's another thing. You know, sorry, George, you know, athleisure. The thing is that like there's so many of us, and if I didn't have that data, if I didn't have the proof to walk into a room full of ignorance and say, wait a second, because I know you think I'm the man, and I'm really not a man. I'm not really angry. I'm a happy guy. I'm a very happy guy. But the problem is, without the data, you're gonna put me in that box. You're gonna shut me up and say there's no problem to see here. My top 10, my top 20 list is just gonna get dropped. And I'm sorry, George, I just don't like your stuff. And there's 2 other designers I could think of. There's so many more. And without having the proof to walk in that room, and by the way, Sabah, you're hired, all right? We gotta talk a little later, you're hired. And just to say, it's near to impossible. And the thing is that what I've been able to amass in such a short amount of time of proof, in such a short amount of time for a problem that has been so stretched long for all of my history as a designer here in Canada, it's crazy. I've had arguments less than 4 months ago of saying, George, I don't believe you, and you're gonna have problems to amass more than 10. I can guarantee more than 10. Strike me down with thunder if you could find more than 10 Black designers. And it just gave me more fire. And when I found so many more collected, I'm just like, if I didn't have this, nothing would be happening as is happening now, nothing of it. So thank you for the data. Thank you, because believe it or not, there's still arguments saying that there's no problem to see here. There's no problem. Fight that with nothing. Try fighting that with nothing.
Elise, let's go to you last.
I'm sorry, I muted myself. I think there's different ways that the data collection and hiring can go. I feel like it could like potentially force organizations to be more progressive and make changes. It'll also bring to light, you know, and show the public that maybe they're not being as diverse as they're claiming to be. And I don't know, I have mixed feelings because like, if they do have this data, like what if they reach a certain quota and feel like, because we reached that quota, now we don't have to be diverse anymore, or we don't have to hire any more people of color. And I don't want that to be an issue. Also, we don't see a lot of Black and Indigenous people and a lot of spaces, and that data can bring that to light as well and open up more opportunities for people of color so that we're not limited by who we are, like our race or our skin color. So I think it can go either way.
Great points. You know, listening to you, I think overwhelmingly you agree that data collection is necessary for holding organizations accountable for their hiring practices. I only have one thought to add to that, which is the importance of getting through this step quickly so that we can get to the next step, which is actually reforming hiring. I would love to see major Canadian fashion companies like Holt Renfrew, Hudson's Bay, Essence, Canada Goose, Lululemon participate in the Black and Fashion Council's Equality Index score. You know, Vanessa, I think it was really interesting to hear about how some of your BIPOC covers and content has performed. And, you know, I'm sure this data would be especially compelling when negotiating with advertisers. Also, Charmaine, Lana, Celia, you spoke about the changes that have to happen in the beauty space, you know, whether that's beauty schools, shoots, backstage at shows. Celia, your work with the Big Four Fashion Weeks to draft a code of conduct for productions teams is such a great idea. It's one that I think Toronto Fashion Week and other fashion weeks in Canada should implement too. Okay, so we're at 5:35. We can go till about 6:10, and we're on the last question, and that's about content. I'm just going to remind everybody to try and keep your answers to 2 minutes so that we can still take some questions from the audience. And so, Something all of you have in common is content creation. While your individual roles in content creation are different, whether that's branding, designing, writing, casting, styling, modeling, art direction, photography, or producing, all of you contribute to the story. To quote our very own Sabah Kwao, who, along with many other marketers, has said this: content is king. And so my final question is, with an industry more willing to embrace Black creative skills, talent, and leadership, what content do you want to make and see? And what content do you never want to see again? Let's go to Natasha.
Thank you. Yeah, a big one for me is in terms of content creation, the one-off stories or, you know, the all Black issues. I think those are great. They're celebratory. I love those, but, you know, they're so far in between of each other. And, you know, in terms of a beauty lens, you know, me being the beauty director at Fashion, one thing that's like really boggled my mind for many years, and just being a beauty editor throughout my career, is the lack of stories about like textured hair, curly hair. You rarely would, like when I'm doing my research to write about something like that, rarely am I seeking that from a Canadian source. It's, you know, we see it a lot in the States because they have the Black publications, but I feel like, you know, there needs to be more outlets dedicating the time that's key and the space to talking about textured hair. You know, there's just so much to unpack there. And something that I really, really wanted to bring to Fashion when I started. So I started a weekly column called Texture Talk every Thursday. And it's just packing the dynamic the dynamic world of curly hair. I mean, you know, you look at the Canadian population and, you know, with all the mixed race families growing now, there's so many people who have a different hair texture than just straight. So, you know, where are they getting their information? Where are they seeing themselves reflected? There's so many great hair tips to share. There's so many, you know, what I love about beauty is it's so personal, and curly hair is so personal, textured hair is so personal. And usually you can unpack a lot there about somebody's culture and identity. And again, that needs to be something that's regularly told. So something at Fashion I've really made my mission to do. And then behind, like, other things too is when it comes to content created by BIPOC voices, Black and Indigenous specifically, I want to see more content where it's not just when those type of writers are hired, those types of voices are hired. It's not just race-based content. It's not just content based on a struggle or what have you, that, you know, we are celebrating these voices, we're celebrating their talent, that their writing experience, their voice, and that they can write about anything, really, because at the end of the day, they are talented, they worked hard to be where they are, to pursue the careers they have pursued. So I just want to be able to read a story, and if I Google that author, be like, wow, you know, that's a talented voice of color. And the story I read wasn't just based on, like, you know, their lived experience of a struggle or something related to just their background. So yeah, just more content, more vast content from writers of color.
Really resonates with me. Let's go to Richard.
Lana, I wanted to share something with you before, it's a bit off topic, but before at the inception of all of this narrative or talk about Black Lives Matter, what was interesting is that I had phone calls from all the modeling agencies. I had calls from, you know, colleagues that I've known for years and years and years, and we've never had this dialogue before. But part of what everyone wanted to know was, how is it as a hair and makeup agency, myself and my colleagues at Page One and Platino could better facilitate our artists being able to be more inclusive behind the scenes there on set. So that conversation is happening, as Celia has also mentioned. I think, Celia, you're a little bit ahead of us on that, but that conversation is happening now amongst our community, and trying to make sure that, you know, anyone that is behind the scenes working, whether you're Black, Indigenous, green, purple, whatever your color hair is, they have the skill set to do it. The responsibility is on us as agents, okay, to make sure that we're putting the right people in those jobs, you know, and for you, to your comment, it's moving that way. Content, yeah, I mean, content is king. What we choose to view and consume is huge. It impacts us unconsciously a lot of times. I find that I was looking through a magazine the other day, and I was noting that every 5th or 6th page, there was some content with either a Black model or a Black article and what have you. Sure, I get it's now, and there's a consciousness about what we're going to be putting in a magazine, what we want to appeal to people and what people are going to read. But I also think, again, these forums and this conversation and all moves that forward. You know what I mean? Just to keep talking about it. And I mean, I like to dream with my eyes open. And one of those is that, there'll be a time when we won't be having this conversation, and we'll just be going, hey, you know what? Love her, love him. Yeah, the hair's going to be challenging. Let's get someone who can do that hair and do that. And then we take the best people, we put them in the best position to be successful. And it's a totality of all our efforts, not just the individual pieces.
That's great. Let's go to Steve.
Again, I know that there's lots of people that we have to get through, and we are just on the end of our chat. So I'm going to keep it brief because most of the points here I've touched on already. What content do I want to make? I'm going to continue to do what I've been doing, which is putting Black people in positive light. I think that if I only photographed Black people, I don't think that anyone would know my name. I think that for me, one thing that's important for Black people, and any Black person that's out there that's a household name, Beyonce, Jay-Z, they have something called crossover ability. And for me, that's the thing that I've always realized that was super important, is that I have to be liked and appreciated by all people. And the more focused I am just on like, hey, I got to be super cool with my own demo, it's going to hurt me on a everything. When I started to shoot too many rappers, I knew that when people heard my name, there was like, oh yeah, that photographer who shoots hip hop. Well, I knew I had to start shooting Colin Firth and Michael Sheen and working on crossover appeal, because for us people who are visible minorities that are trying to be a household name, we have to have crossover appeal. So that's the thing that I focus on is, yes, I showcase Black people in the most positive light, but I try to showcase everybody in the most positive light. Yes, I treat Black people like superstars, but I have to treat everybody like a superstar because we're all stars. And I think that it's important for me to be neutral when I approach my content. It's important for me to be egoless when I approach my content, so I can showcase the people who are in front of my lens in a positive light. And really, I just want to continue to showcase talented voices of color, whatever their background is. That's it. Oh, and what don't I want to see? For just touching on that quickly, for me, what don't I want to see? It's impossible to filter creativity, especially when it's not my own. So I don't want to be filtered visually. So it's impossible for me to try to filter other people, what they do visually. But what I can do is control what I see. And what I control currently is I don't look at anything that's glorified violence. I don't look at anything that's blood. I don't look at anything that causes my own self to jump into a flight or fight situation. So I've always tried to avoid, I rarely even look at like conflict news because it stains my soul. So for me, glorified violence, I stay away from. Fear mongering, I stay away from, and violent imagery. And for me, I'm all about positive and putting out the positive. And in order for me to do that, although it kind of makes me slightly biased toward the positive, I really try to filter my eyes from things that put me in flight or fight mode, because I feel like for our own sanity and health, we've lived in flight or fight mode for 500 years. So it's time for us to kind of get into that point where we feel calm and we feel blessed and we feel thankful and we feel gratitude, and we fill our eyes with love and light, and we shield our eyes from fear and violence.
Let's go to Vanessa.
I think that what I would like to see is more content that assumes the intelligence of the audience. We don't have to explain everything. Let's just let people figure some of it out. If it's challenging, that's great. And I want to see content that isn't entirely focused on suffering and toil. You know, like we've touched on this already. Like you hire, oh, let's hire a Black writer to write about, you know, the agony that they endured. Or let's make another movie about slavery. Like, let's just do it. You know, why can't we have stories about Black joy? Why can't we just have stories about the minutia of life? And actually, for me, I feel like that is where the biggest connections come, where you realize we're all the same in many, many ways. But if we hear the story about someone's family gathering or this or that, the specific can be the global. So I'd like to see that. And I'd also like to see an increase in talent that is behind the scenes, that is of color. You know, right now we all are seeing the September issues drop, and it's just like, there's a sea of melanin out there, and that's bomb. But I'm like, we went through this in 2018 when there was this, by luck of the draw, we all had Black women on our covers, and there was a whole big conversation piece around it, and then it went back to normal. So I want to see behind the scenes, because when you're behind the scenes, you are not just looking at the face of something, you're also looking at the decision makers, the content style, the conversations, the understanding of the true way to have a conversation that is inclusive and diverse. So I want to see an increase in talent behind the scenes so that more things can happen in front of the scenes. And as for what I don't want to see any more of, I don't want to see colorism in model choices. I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of the standard that is just like light skinned is the right skin. I'm tired of that. I don't know why that is still prevalent within our community and externally, obviously, really, really badly externally. Yeah, so talent behind the scenes, let's stop tokenism, please and thank you. And let's just have some beautiful, fun, joyous things created around our culture that isn't about suffering or toil.
Let's go to Charmaine.
Just to pick up on what Sabah said about how the data is so necessary. Yeah, the data makes the obvious concrete. For heaven's sake, how long have I, try to buy the right color foundation at the drugstore, on, and lines that have brought it in and take it out because it didn't sell, and then there's an influx of the South Asian community. Okay, let's try market to them. Okay, it works, it doesn't work. On and on, all these touch points, I would really, and this is where we're getting once again to the systemic stuff, is why all these little micro changes that need to add up to something more concrete and positive and lasting. And you're right, Vanessa, we need to see different images of Black beauty. It's not all the approved, images, and I don't want to get too political into it, but you know what I mean? There's a certain look that gets over, and then there are others that are pushing it too much. Needs to open up for everything. And you're right, life matters, right? Everybody's life matters. Animal life matters. The planet life, the environment, life matters, right? So I would like to see messages that really address. I would like to see images where I don't even think about it anymore, quite frankly, where there is just such a rainbow of, it can also be handicapped people and various other marginalized. It's the marginalization of people now that need to be brought in and given their just right to exist and participate and be reflected back in the society. That's what I would really like to have. And yeah, I don't want to be just a trend or a fetish. There's more to us than that. Thank you.
Let's go to Len. Oh, you're on mute, Len.
Just riffing on Vanessa's point about wanting to see good experiences. I thought it was just bravo, bravo, bravo to Dior for their last menswear show. Kim Jones had met an African artist. I think his name is Omoko Boafo. And he saw him at Art Basel. They met, maybe it was prearranged, but he was touched by the work. And he went all the way to Accra for them to collaborate, to see how Kim Jones could bring that work to life. There was no patronization, there was no anything, it was just beautiful art. And it wasn't another show about African influence, which has been done about 400 times. This was like a real show, and with these men wearing these beautiful textures and motion, that a big brand has made a financial decision to stand behind the creative director to put the brand on all Black men. I thought it was a really wonderful experience. It would be great for those things to happen periodically, right? I think it's gorgeous. So it comes back to the corporations, and I think that, you know, Bay Street and many other, you know, financial streets are all hyper masculine. It's a bastion for white men. And, you know, I think that there's work that's happening, West Hall and the other people who are trying to get work to make more representation on those levels happen. So the decision makers allowing creative people to just be creative, and more of that happening, I think is something I would love to see. Opening the avenue for creativity that comes from the real artist. And yeah, done. That's what needs to happen. It needs to be opened.
Let's go to Lana.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna continue on from what Len said and from what, you know, Vanessa was saying. As far as creative content, for that content to just be creative. Forget about the fact that you know, not as a Black person who is creative, not being expected to check certain boxes, to just have the ability, I mean, it's so much pressure to have to check those boxes. You should just have the ability to be creative. There shouldn't have to be the, oh, they're urban, okay, check. Oh, that's a political statement, okay, that's check. Okay, that's gonna tell some story of a struggle through, you know, where you rose up, okay, that's check. But, you know what I mean? Where's the story that's just about joy? Where's the creativity that's just creative? It's not making some political statement. Where is the, you know what I mean? Like all of that stuff. Like for me, content wise, I just want to see something that's beautiful. And that as a Black creative person, I don't want to feel that I have to check all of these things for the person in power who might not be my ethnicity, but feels that that's what I'm supposed to be doing. What I'm supposed to do is create. Anything beyond that, yeah, you shouldn't have to do it.
Let's go to Sabah.
What I want to see is content that reimagines the world the way we want to see it. And we create visual communication. We have a lot of power to do that. But I'll reference Vanessa's point about behind the scenes, and let's go all the way to the back and say, we also need to be the ultimate decision makers. That means we need more entrepreneurs who make the ultimate decision before anything else goes forward. You have to be able to make the decisions where the disruption takes place. And that means media ownership, design ownership, technology ownership, finance, healthcare. People making those decisions from a Black point of view, from an Indigenous point of view, from a person of color's point of view, from a woman's point of view, is ultimately going to make the biggest change because it's coming from the top down. There's a lot of ground up activity, but ultimately someone has to be at the top of the food chain, and it's hard. I'm not going to put a gloss on entrepreneurship because it's one of the hardest things you could possibly do, and there will be a lot of failure, but unless we have enough people at the top of the food chain, we're not going to be able to have enough control.
Let's go to Celia.
I agree, Sabah, 100%. That's really what it comes down to. We need to see more producers of color. We need to see more casting directors of color. We need to see more decision makers in fashion of color who actually can decide yes, no, maybe so, and base it on whatever their aesthetic is. I mean, earlier on we were speaking about, you know, our own creative identity. And what I would like to see is more creative content from all of the wonderful people that are actually on this panel. You know, let's start at home. You know, let's start buying, ELLE Canada. Let's start buying Flair. Let's start supporting local. Let's start buying Lana Ogilvy's products. Let's start buying George Sully's shoes. Let's start supporting our own. You know, it's all lovely and airy-fairy, but at the end of the day, what can you do? What can I do? What can we do? We can support each other. And whatever content creation decisions any of you make, I will support you. That's what we can say, and that's what we can do.
Fully agree. Let's
Preach, Celia. You preach, girl.
Let's go to George.
So let's start buying my new shoe for the kids. that was awesome, and you know what? Absolutely. Where I say for content, I think I gotta go, guys. I gotta go. What I would say is, for content wise, I think going back to, I think Steve was saying a little bit about it. You can pretty much filter the content you want to see and what you don't want to see. I'm pretty much dialed in with my content that I'm responsible for, that I create for others. And so I'll leave it at that. I'm good, so to speak. It's kind of like, because we're in this world of just social media, and really there's so many options and you can turn off and turn on. So it's kind of like, find what you like, you know, enjoy what you enjoy. I know for myself, if I'm responsible for me, then I know my demo, I know the vast, and again, I have a few brands, men's, women's, unisex. So it's one of those things that, like, I'm pretty much dialed in. Like Sabah said, I mean, as an entrepreneur, it's a hard thing. But I'm dialed in, and I'm sticking to my content. And if you don't like it, turn it off. No, it's I'm dialed in. So do what you feel. If just do what you feel for your content, and you know.
And let's finally go to Elise.
I'd definitely like to see like more Black creatives, artists, stylists, models, and actors being able to tell their stories. I would like to see more Indigenous and Black culture incorporated into media and TV. Our stories deserve to be told, and we deserve to be seen. And I feel like there's been a lot of limitations, and especially in the fashion industry. There's been a lot of times with me where I couldn't go to a certain casting, or I couldn't do certain things because I don't have the classic look. I don't want any limitations for people of color. I want us to be able to just walk in and just be ourselves and be able to have that representation. I think Black culture is one of the biggest influences in the world, and we don't get enough credit or recognition for it. And so I think we need that representation to show who we are, because it's going to put a stop to all the whole culture appropriation stuff, because we don't get credit for a lot of the things we do. We heavily influence music, clothing, media, slang, hairstyles, products, everything. So yeah, I just want to see more representation for Indigenous people and for Black people as well. And then things I don't want to see the token Black models anymore in media or in magazines. And I don't want them using Black people or Black culture for clout, or, you know, using us when it's beneficial for them. So those are the things I don't want to see anymore.
Thanks for these great answers. You know, I wanted to ask this question last because I felt it was a final opportunity to leave our audience with very clear directives on how Black creatives want to be engaged going forward. And I think there was some really interesting overlap in your answers. You know, for example, Natasha and Vanessa, you mentioned wanting to see more Black and BIPOC creatives behind the scenes, not just being called upon to talk about their lived experience. You know, Vanessa and Steve, you mentioned traumatic content and wanting to see less of that, which I fully agree with. Vanessa and Elise, you also mentioned tokenism. You know, and Celia, I thought you made such a great point where we have to use content to drive our personal purchasing decisions. You know, that's it's a really, we have to say it and do it. That's really, really important. We had a conversation off panel about the place of all Black fashion shows and magazine issues going forward. Nobody would deny the monumental beauty and significance and joy of all Black content, like Valentino Haute Couture Spring 19, Kim Jones's Spring 2021 Dior Men collection in collaboration with Ghanaian artist Amoko Boafo, as Len mentioned. And, but as many of you have said, all Black content is best placed and appreciated amidst content that consistently represents BIPOC. That's where we have to get to. So I want to go to some audience questions now. We're right at 6 o'clock, now that we've run through our 4 topics. So okay, so this is a really interesting question. So Ewan, could we put the camera on Troy? The question, I might just say it and then he might repeat it. The question is about the Black in Fashion Council, which I mentioned during my questions. And Troy wants to know how the panel feels about this alliance and where does it start? So I think anybody can take this question and anybody can answer it or not.
Okay. Just recently, I had a conversation with Lindsay from Black in Fashion Council, and I think it starts at just reaching out. And I reached out and she responded. I reached out to Sandrine first, and then Lindsay reached out, and there wasn't all the information on their page. There was just, a few of the bullet points, but it's one of those things that her just filling me in on a little bit more. I just told her, whatever I can do from what I'm doing, if you see somewhere where we can just do this, then at least it's a start. And what they're doing over there is as important as what we're doing over here, is what people in Europe are doing over there. So I think it's just a starting point, just to have dialogue. And I've been having a lot of dialogue with a lot of really interesting people. And it's just, it got to start somewhere. It has to start somewhere.
That's great. I have a question here from Stephanie. If Stephanie is still on the call, then we can turn her camera on. Her question is, and I think this would be a good one for you, Charmaine. How will fashion schools work with Black students to better equip them to navigate racial barriers in Canada's fashion industry? Because you're a prof at Ryerson, so I think if you'd like to take that one.
Thank you. Oh boy, big question. They're gonna have to face it, right? How prepared are they? I guess they're gonna have to be. That's the bottom line. I'll tell you something. I have taught for a few years now. And I would say that within the last 2 years is the first time I've ever had students come to me as a Black instructor and say, we feel racism. We're experiencing it, whether it's from the environment or the other students or even professors, and so I know that they need help. We need content. We need representation, right? They need to be validated. Change is coming slowly. Ryerson is making, steps. There are way more Black professors now. But in terms of really getting to Black issues, I think they're starting to make attempts. As I say, I know that Ryerson Journalism, which is the department I used to teach in, they have now started a course covering Black in media, but that's one. The other places I teach, maybe they're busy or something, it's not on the top of their agenda. Maybe they're more into innovation or they're into something else. So the bottom line is, though, that this message And this whole sentiment is rising up. And traditionally, colleges and universities have been the ground where these messages are given their rigor and debated and put forward. And colleges and universities, it would be a huge failure. It would be an enormous embarrassment to not answer this time for racialized, for BIPOC students. I don't know if I've answered the question because we're still building.
I think you totally have. Now we have Janae. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. We're going to turn her video on, and she has a question for Lana and Elise.
The push for superhero legalization is becoming a worldwide movement. Sorry, right when you hi, right when you asked me, when you mentioned me, my camera went out, and then
No problem.
Okay, hello guys.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so I've been really watching this whole thing. Okay, so my question was, Lana, you mentioned being a canvas and stuff, and I'm a model too. Hi, I'm a model too, and I just remember a lot of times when, hold on, let me mute this because I feel like I remember a lot of times when I've been in situations where I didn't feel comfortable on set just because people didn't know how to do my hair or whatever it is, or I could be in a situation where I calmly am approaching like, hey, I'm not sure if that product works for my hair or something, or maybe we could work this out, you know. I just wanted to know, what do you think the best way is, or how, what approaches have you taken? What things have worked for you, Elise and Lana, to approach that, especially as a model, as the canvas, you know, sometimes it's like you feel like you don't have a voice. So,
well, I mean, I am going to say, like, you know, obviously depends what you're doing. You know, it's one thing if you're doing editorial, because usually more often in that kind of situation, sure, it's someone, you know, it's someone who kind of has a vision for the particular editorial. They've seen the clothes, they've seen the this. So they are probably have an ability to work with your hair. But I do think that you always need to have that, you know, not be afraid to iterate. Oh, you know, this kind of thing doesn't work, this kind of thing works better. But, you know, you can say it in a nice way. Obviously on the more commercial side, which is more what I do now these days, that's a whole other thing. And I am going to say there's a real lack of knowledge, a real lack of training, a real lack of hairdressers or being willing to learn, being willing to spend the time, being willing to do the work, because often as not, I'm blow drying my own hair while he's spent 2 hours doing my, you know, the other woman's hair, giving her a haircut and everything, and doesn't even want to blow dry my hair. You know, you still have to kind of politely put that out there, because unfortunately, we are the ones who will not be hired back. Not that hairdresser, not that art director who forgot to tell the hairdresser how the client wants my hair to look, because that's happened too, you know, where the freelance art director neglects to tell the hairdresser beforehand what he should bring with him in order to do the right job. You know, so it's like this really hard balance as a model. I'm sure, you know, Elise has a whole bunch of other stuff to add to that because she works more in the editorial world.
I know, as for me, I feel like at first, when I first started modeling, I thought it was really rude if I like threw in my 2 cents about how I wanted my appearance to be. But when I seen that it became damaging as I kept working, like I'm supposed to be confident on set, and I'm supposed to, you know, feel beautiful and stuff. I feel like it's a team effort. So I feel like it's okay if you're like, hey, can we use this product because this will do this to my hair? I think it's okay to to add that in there. I know I bring my, it's such a challenge, but I bring my own hair products in my bag just in case they don't have it. And like, it sucks that, you know, I have to learn how to cornrow my own hair now because the hairstylist isn't going to know how to do it. But I feel like, you know, we can make that change in the industry. And there's a lot of hairstylists and makeup artists who are open to, you know, you helping them out. Or there's several times where I've given products away to hairstylists, or they ask me, oh, can you make me a list of things I should buy or things I should carry? It's a conversation that is okay to have. And I think that's really important. And I know this is off topic, but I wanted to throw this in here. Janae on here is the first woman to open up for Louis Vuitton. So I just wanted to throw that in there. So, yeah. Yep.
Amazing.
First Black woman, excuse me.
Thanks so much for your question. As the final question, let's go to Felicia. Let's turn her video on. She had a great question about the first piece of media or content you encountered, and she'll ask the question again. Oh, perfect.
Hi panel. Thank you guys so much for your time. So my question was, when and what was the first media or content that you saw that you feel represented your identity and wasn't just a stereotype?
Well, I'm going to jump in if no one's going to say anything.
I didn't know who was it directed at, sorry.
Oh, all of you guys.
I just be really quick. So for me, you know, I was never interested in fashion, never even really thought about it much. And when American ELLE first came out and I was in school, my French teacher had always brought in French ELLE and stuff when we'd read that in class. And that's when I kind of got interested in it. And that's when American ELLE came out. And American ELLE was the first magazine I saw that put people on the cover who not just looked like me, but people that looked like everybody, you know, people who were Indian, who were Persian, who were Asian, who were Black, who were like everything. I had never seen that. That is the first fashion magazine I ever bought. And that is that for me, I was like, oh my God, these are beautiful women. But up until that point, I had never seen myself represented.
Yeah, for me, it was magazines as well. I mean, early days, I remember seeing Veronica Webb in ELLE and just being like blown away. But when I was a little bit older, I was living in the UK and my mom sent me Suede magazine. I don't know if anyone remembers this. Suzanne Boyd created this amazing magazine. It only ran for like 4 or 5 issues, I think. And that magazine like just blew my mind, seeing a magazine focused on women of color, speaking to you in about the same topics I would see if I picked up like, you know, 17 or Glamour or anything like that. Well, here's someone talking to me that same way. That really made a huge difference for me, that there actually was like people are out there caring about what we think, talking directly to us, and it looks cute. I wish that magazine was still around. RIP.
Does anybody else want to?
Ebony magazine, Essence magazine. Anybody remember Jet?
Yeah.
Right. So, man, I love seeing those old school things. And yeah, that's where I saw myself reflected. Hardly anywhere else.
Also, can I just shout out Felicia, my former intern at ELLE, one of my former interns from a little while ago. Shout out Felicia for asking your question, being heard.
Nice one, Felicia. For me, it's just like, because I'm behind the camera, it was learning about Gordon Parks. He's a very famous Black photographer who died very recently. He's the first Black man to shoot for Vogue. Once I knew there was such a man like Gordon Parks and that he was Black and shooting fashion, like I knew I'm going to do this, you know, even if there was no one around who looked like me that was doing what I was trying to do. I knew that someone out there had Grace who looked like me had graced those pages. So it was all about Gordon Parks for me.
Yeah, I would say like, I don't remember the magazine it was, but I remember my first magazine that I saw where I saw a representation of myself was, it was this magazine I received in grade 8 and it had Stacey McKenzie on the front. And then I was like, from that point on, I was like, oh, I can model. I can, you know, be in that industry because I saw her. That was my representation. And then, yeah, like I grew up reading like Essence magazine and Jet and stuff like that because my mom always had them around. So I had that representation. And I don't know, I think it's called like black hair, but we had those in the house as well. So
yeah, black hair bags. Oh,
yep.
yeah.
Richard would have scouted you on the street for sure anyways. You for sure would have met a model. You would have been a model if you didn't see Stacey McKenzie. Richard would have scouted you, I'm sure.
Yes.
Celia, I think to add?
Yeah, I think more of a recent, it's a bit more of a recent edition, but in 2008, August edition of Vogue Italia, when they did the all black issue, for me, that represented a paradigm shift. Because not only was it the first time in Vogue's 100 and some odd year history that they ever dedicated a whole issue to models of color, because of the huge success, they ended up having to reprint it, which has never ever happened in Vogue's history. Because of the success, if you go to the Vogue Italia website, they have something called Vogue Black, which is actually still online. It never went back into reprint, but every month there are articles that are about women of color, about Black women in particular. That magazine, once I saw it, I decided I had to work for Vogue Italia, and I had the great pleasure and great honor of being able to bring Vogue Italia to Toronto and shooting 3 separate stories, video and actual photography in 2012, I think it was. But being able to bring Vogue Italia to Toronto to celebrate Black voices and Black models was for me a game changer.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's major.
Did anybody else want to add? If not, then I have one small thing. This is off script, but I just thought of it, so I'll share it. But please, anybody else go ahead if they.
One more. Does anyone remember the first time they saw Grace Jones? And
oh, for sure.
The breakthrough just from Black, gender, outlier. And I remember being stunned just in terms of what was that?
Yeah, man.
It's crazy that you mentioned that because this is what I wanted to show everyone. I just reached behind me on my bookshelf. So this is from November 1989. And it's this.
Oh, wow.
No way! And I actually was able to get it signed by her.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Wow.
I'm just gonna just share it, and it's just crazy that you mentioned her because you know, just
that Jamaican gal.
A universal icon. So, you know, I think I'll go into my closing remarks. I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon for Black Canadian Style. Here's the Thing, a discourse on the importance of Black Canadian identities in fashion, design, culture, and media, presented by MODECANADAROCKS and MELANI Beauty. Our incredible panelists have left us with so many important takeaways that we must carry through in our work as fashion professionals, as consumers, as people. That cultural heritage does not always inform the work of Black creatives, the role that advertisers play in creating equity in fashion media, the importance of data collection and reforming hiring practices, the need for more Black creatives behind the scenes, and using content to drive our personal purchasing decisions. We have more power as individuals than we think. If you know somebody who missed this live discussion, please let them know that this conversation will be on YouTube soon. And thanks again, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Good to see everybody.
Thanks, everybody. That was really fantastic.
That was great.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.